I am so glad that everybody is here today. Please let me know where you are joining from in the comments. I've been looking forward to this for a couple weeks, and I'm really grateful for your spending your time with me. We are all so busy. We've got so much going on. So it really means so much to me for you to just spend a little bit of time talking about workplace anti-racism. Hey, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us. It looks like they're having trouble streaming to LinkedIn. This may be an issue on LinkedIn's end. We'll keep trying. Oh my gosh, I hope that they get that figured out. Let me know if you're here. Oh, so Val is saying not yet. Um, uh, LinkedIn, please get it together. Let me know if you are here. Okay, Kathy said thanks, so that might be good. So yeah, let me know. Let me know where you're joining from. Please let me know. We've got over 400 people who said they were planning to attend, so we should have tons of people on here. So, oh, it looks like I have a check mark on LinkedIn, so that might be good. Let me know where you're joining from in the comments. Please let me know. I think that LinkedIn was having some technical difficulties, so I want to be sure that this is streaming. So far, I've got Kathy and Val. Happy to have, oh, we've got Lauren. Wonderful. I think LinkedIn is working now. Oh, yes, everyone is flowing in. There was a little glitch, I think, on LinkedIn's end. So, yeah, let me know where you're joining from. Glad to have you. Anita, Lisa, Hurley, thank you so much. Susan, everybody is streaming in now. So, yeah, keep letting me know in the comments where you're joining from. Again, I was just saying, I really appreciate your spending your time. I take this so seriously, and I really want you to walk away having been glad that you spent this time. I want to give you some tangible, practical tips. I want you to walk away feeling like you've learned something that maybe causes you to think differently or maybe reaffirmed something. But I really want this time to be tremendously valuable. So I hope that it is. As per my usual, I have more planned than we can get through. So hopefully that's going to be a good thing for you guys, but I'll just apologize in advance that I probably overplanned. Also want to acknowledge this is a time of Rosh Hashanah. So for our Jewish colleagues, brothers and sisters, we just want to acknowledge that and just acknowledge everybody. So with that, I really just want to dive in. Like I said, I've got so much planned. Thank you guys so much for letting me know where you're joining from. And I am going to circle back to your comments. Before I forget, I want to go ahead and let you know what we have coming up. If you didn't join our last session, there were almost 6,000 people. We had over 5,800 people on our last session on microaggressions. So if you missed it and that's a topic of interest to you, please just head over to my YouTube channel. You can catch all the archives there, but lots and lots of good stuff there. Coming up on the 21st, we're going to talk about, this is my top 10 list, 10 specific ways to enhance your racial literacy. I said last time that I think that every individual and organization needs 3 magic components in order to even have these conversations in a productive way. I think you've got to have racial literacy, you've got to have racial humility, and you've got to have racial stamina. And so next time I'm going to give you 10 very specific ways you can build that racial literacy. Then on October 5th, I am super excited. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Melanie Dukes, and we're going to talk about something that a lot of people have been asking me about. We've called it From Code Switching to Tone Policing, the unique challenges facing BIPOC professionals and how to navigate them. So put those 2 dates on your calendar. Again, we're here first and third Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern time. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. Let me just tell you what I've got planned. There are lots of questions that you guys voted on or sent me, just wonderful questions. I picked these three. First one, difference between prejudice and racism. Then we're going to talk about reverse racism. Several people reached out and said, they keep hearing that, and, what are my thoughts on that, or how to respond when people bring that up. So we're going to unpack that. I think those two will be fairly quick, but I want to leave a lot of time to talk about topic one. Most people wanted to hear about that. How is it that someone can have Black friends or be married to a Latinx woman or have a dentist that's a Black man or have adopted a Black child? How can they be accused of saying something racist or doing something racist? So we're going to unpack that. I've got lots of good stuff there. There's so many layers there. I'm going to talk about why we should use racist as an adjective, not a noun. And then I'm going to close out, if we have time, with my personal examples, times that I've been racist, times that I've been biased. So stay for that if you can. All right. So with that, let's first start off with prejudice versus racism. Prejudice is something, I define it as bias against any group. Okay. We can all have prejudice. We all do probably have prejudice. You might have prejudice against people who are overweight. You might have prejudice against people based on religion, race, sex, gender, all types of different things. But that is just your bias, your belief system. Okay. That's not necessarily hurting someone else. But what happens is when we take action, then that becomes discrimination. So, for example, I might have a belief system that says, I think Black people are lazy. Or, I think Black people just aren't as smart. I can have that belief. If I'm a college student and I'm in a class and, one of my peers who's over there, I don't even know who they are, they think less of me because I'm Black. That doesn't necessarily hurt me. That's just their, ridiculous belief system. But if it's the teacher who thinks that, and so now she starts to grade me more harshly, or because she has a lowered expectation, she views my comments differently. Now that is an act that becomes discrimination. Okay. You guys see the difference? Let me know in the comments. You see the difference? Because at the end of the day, this is something most people probably won't say, but I don't really care. Like the random white people who think less of Black people, I don't really care so much about that. Yes, it'd be great if we all lived in a world where there was no bias and nobody thought anything different, or nobody thought less of anyone because of, physical characteristics. But that is of much less concern to me, what people think personally versus how it impacts me, versus how it impacts my child's opportunities. That's where we need to dig in. Okay. And then the last step, because we talked about, we first talked about prejudice, then we said discrimination. Now, racism is where it becomes systemic. Okay. So now if prejudice is a belief, discrimination is an action, then racism is a system. Lots of definitions out there for racism. I have two favorite ones that I use. It's prejudice plus power, okay? Or it's a system of advantage based on race. And the distinction here is that too often the system is going to lead to inequitable outcomes or disparate outcomes independent of what a particular individual does. So it's like we don't really need the individuals anymore. The system is in place to discriminate. All right. One of the ways that happens is we may not explicitly discriminate against a particular group of people, but maybe we have criteria in the process that indirectly discriminates. One of my favorite examples was Ursula Burns. How many of you know who Ursula Burns is? Let me know in the comments. Who knows who Ursula Burns is? She just released a memoir recently, and I highly, highly recommend it. I don't see anybody saying anything in the comments. Does anybody know who Ursula Burns is? You guys, come on. Maybe I should wait until somebody tells me who Ursula Burns is before I comment. Ursula Burns was the first Black woman to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Okay, if you look at the stats of the Fortune 500, it's those are one of my favorites to pull out because it's really disgraceful. I mean, it's a 67-year-old list. Ursula was president of Xerox from 2009 to 2016, so she was on the list for 7 years. Okay, 67-year-old list. She was president for she was on the list for 7 years. Okay. We just recently had 2 other Black females in May of 2021 who made the list. All the other years, there were zero Black females leading Fortune 500 companies. Okay. So, she says she met her one time. Oh my gosh, I would love to meet her. It was such a powerful book, such a powerful book. So Ursula was given an interview and they were asking her about the dearth of Black people on boards. And you guys know, this is in the news now. It's a major, major issue, major problem. Everyone is just throwing their hands up. We don't know why we can't, find Black people to participate on these boards. We need to do better. We absolutely need to do better. We're working on it. And one of the things that Ursula said was you got to revisit the criteria. Okay. For many of these leading companies and large companies and blue chip companies, for their boards, one of the criteria has been that you had to have been a CEO of a company previously, of a major company previously. Well, guess what? There have been almost no Black people. Right now they're 5, so that's 1%, a whopping 1%. Black people have largely been excluded. And again, I'm saying Black. I tend to say Black a lot for a couple of reasons, but I don't mean to exclude. Certainly, this is an issue that other people of color have struggled with, but not necessarily in the same way. So that's one of the reasons why I do call out Black in particular. But as long as you have criteria that basically discriminates against a particular racial group, you're not going to have or see that racial group represented. And what she said was, certainly there are other ways to judge someone's leadership capacity. Why do you necessarily have to use criteria that has that discriminatory impact? Okay. So some of that, when we talk about systemic racism, it's not necessarily explicit, but it's something that's baked into the system. Think about the criteria your company might use for recruiting, for promotions. Now there's a lot more attention being paid to HBCUs because they've been ignored for so long. Historically Black colleges and universities, unpaid internships. There's so many ways that companies have used criteria and processes that have had a discriminatory impact, whether that was the intention or not. Okay, so that's probably a long-winded answer, but I'm hoping that that was helpful for those who wanted to know a little bit more about the difference between prejudice and racism. So this is the next one I want to tackle. How many of you have heard this? Let me know in the comments if you've heard this. Someone whine about reverse racism. Have you guys heard that before? So I want to really take some time to talk through this. Does reverse racism exist? And so this is my take on it. First of all, my background for those who might not know, I'm not a HR DEI person. My undergraduate degrees were in math and industrial engineering, Spelman and Georgia Tech. And then I got an MBA from Emory. So I've always worked in either technical environments or business environments. And I took a lot of physics to get that math degree and those engineering degrees, a lot of physics. So when I hear reverse racism, one of the first things that I think about is physics. And everybody knows in physics, if an object is in motion, it can't reverse until it first stops. Okay? Do you guys see where I'm going with that? How can we have reverse racism when we haven't first stopped the actual racism? I could rattle off tons and tons of stats that suggest that white men are not disadvantaged in our society. There are tons of stats that support that. If anybody has stats that show that white men are disadvantaged by being white and being male, I would love for somebody to share that. Again, I love to go to the data. We can we can have our different opinions, but we can't have different facts. So let's take a look at what the facts say. So if we look at the Fortune 500 companies again, I did a little number crunching right before we got on. Fortune 500 is 93.4% white. It is 85% white male. Now let's think about that. It's 85% white male, but white men are only 35%, about 35% of the population. So clearly, white men are overrepresented, if anything, in success or advantage. And we could look at, I just put this up here, Gabrielle said not in aviation, because that's where I was going. You can look at the presidents. There's a reason why all of them but one, 45, all of them but one have been white. Look at Congress, look at doctors, look at lawyers, look at judges, overwhelmingly white, much more, and overwhelmingly white male, to be honest, much more so than 35% as they are represented in the population. So I don't think that everyone's really going to try to argue that white men in this society are disadvantaged. Let's keep it real. When people whine about reverse racism, typically what that is, I'll tell you what it's been when I've heard it. You guys tell me in the comments when you've heard it. It's because they got passed over. It's because that individual, they feel they got passed over. I shouldn't even use that term. They didn't get the promotion they thought they should get. And it was awarded to, I should say, was earned by a Black female, or was earned by a Latinx man. It was earned by an Indigenous woman. Because they didn't get the promotion, they didn't get the position, there's an assumption that because it went to a person of color, that's why they got it. And isn't that an offensive assumption in the first place? Okay. Let me tell you where this actually, happened to me. I was in business school and we were having a session on employment law. We were having a class on employment law. And the topic, of course, of affirmative action came up. And so that was one of the things that we were talking about from a legal perspective. And a white guy who was sitting behind me, when that topic came up, you could tell it was very triggering for him. And so he really just kind of went off and he raised his hand. He wanted to say something. And he said, yeah, I'm tired of this. I was up for a promotion and they gave it to this Black lady instead. And so I turned around and I said to him, did it ever occur to you that she might be more qualified? And he didn't really have anything to say, because I don't think that it had occurred to him. I think that just because he was angry because he didn't get his promotion, or he was angry because immediately when he saw that a person of color received it, in his mind, he automatically equated that with it being a gift, that she got it because she was a person of color. It kind of reminded me of that saying, I'm sure that many of you have heard, that when you're a person with privilege, equality often feels like oppression. Okay. And again, I can't speak to every situation, but in my case, I've felt that that's happened. This is when this topic of reverse racism comes up. It's because this particular individual didn't get something and they feel someone else is getting something that belongs to them. So you guys let me know what your experience has been with that in the comments. I want to see if there was something else that I wanted to say about that. Oh, something else I really absolutely need to say, just to clarify this. Part of the reason why we have a problem here is somehow in our mind, there's a coupling that's very much influenced by racial bias. And that coupling is we tend to couple the concept of more diversity with lowered criteria. Okay? And that's not what we're talking about. For me personally, I think that these types of decisions absolutely should be merit-based. Absolutely. But the problem has been there have been many qualified individuals who've been overlooked. They didn't have the advantage of race or gender to help push them over the finish line. So just because you're hiring a Black person, an Indigenous person, a female, etc., doesn't mean you have to lower qualifications. But for too many people, I think that concept, those two have to be decoupled. We can't equate non-white racial groups with lower quality. And I think that is really the crux of the problem, is for too many people, when they see someone who doesn't look like them, they automatically assume there's lesser quality. So let me see. Let me just go to some of these comments. Yes, people in power expect, beneficial outcomes. I think what he's meaning there is, hey, I've been privileged. I've been used to kind of getting what I want, and I kind of don't like when I'm not getting what I want. Let me also see who else. Yes, it is really disturbing when it's assumed that people of color are given positions, yet they're often qualified or have earned those positions. Absolutely. And let me just also say, let me be honest. In my LinkedIn Learning course, I forgot to mention, I've got 2 anti-racism courses on LinkedIn Learning. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, please do. One is how to speak up against racism at work. Another one is supporting allyship and anti-racism at work. So absolutely, please check those out when you get a chance. I dig into a lot of these concepts a lot more deeply in those courses. But what I was going to say before is this. We want to make these selection processes as objective as possible. I promise you, subjectivity is the enemy for many historically marginalized communities, because what tends to happen is once subjectivity starts to creep in, generally that subjectivity does not benefit them. Okay. Generally that subjectivity is based on familiarity. We pledged the same sorority. We, went to the same, went to the same college. We have those similarities as white males, typically because there are more white males in power, or even white females. And so Black people and brown people oftentimes find themselves on the short end of that equation. And so, yes, subjectivity does creep in. But for organizations that are looking around and they're saying, hey, we're lily white, we're serious about this work, we need to diversify. In my view, yes, you should have minimum standards. Yes, it should be merit-based. But in my view, there is nothing wrong with also having a criteria that says we are actively engaged in trying to diversify our community. And so, yes, we want people to meet certain standards. However, we would also love to have more Black and brown people, have more females, have more LGBT colleagues, etc. So again, my feeling is this. We've used subjective criteria. We've had these other criteria since the beginning of time. Why can that not also be a criteria? Not the overriding criteria, not the primary criteria, not what lets somebody in who's unqualified. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that absolutely can, and in many ways should be a factor. Okay. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear what you were thinking as well. All right. I love this. She says racism. This person says racism is not a difference of opinion, it's racism. We must something in the culture of racism understand that we are all equal. Thank you so much for that. And it's disturbing that the topic of lowering qualifications never comes up when it's about promoting white professionals. I think as employees, especially those of us who are white, we should start questioning what is the cost of constantly overlooking talent of color. So I love that. I love that. Okay, let me go to this next one, which is huge. And I want to spend most of my time here. I've got so much to talk to you guys about. So this is the big question. How can people of color, I'm sorry. How can people hold racist views if they're married to a Black person or have a very close friend of color? You guys know what I'm talking about. I wrote an article for Forbes maybe about a month ago or so now called Dear White Colleagues, We're Not Interested in Your Racial Resume. It's, as soon as I sit down next to some white person that I don't even know, they're telling me about their Black dentist or their daughter's Black doll or, or whatever it is. And I understand that it's very well intended. Have you guys had that experience as well? Please let me know in the comments. Let me know that I'm not alone. And so I understand that the intent is good. And we talked last time about it's not about intent, it's about impact. I understand that the intent is good. But what this is trying to say is people are conflating two different things. They think that adjacency, so proximity or adjacency with a Black person, provides you immunity, okay? And that's not how it works, okay? So let me prove to you with a very, very simple series of questions that adjacency does not create immunity, all right? First, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you would agree with me that since the beginning of time, there have been many, 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 probably millions of men who are sexist or hold sexist views, have sexist opinions, make sexist comments, tell sexist jokes? How many of you would agree with that? Let me know in the comments. Just type agree or type yes if you agree with that. Since the beginning of time, there have been many, many, many men who have had those sexist views. Let me know in the comments. Just type in yes. You would agree with that. Now, second question. Of those men who we all agree have sexist dispositions, behaviors, make sexist comments, have sexist views, etc. I'm seeing tons of yeses. I forgot there's a lag. So lots and lots of yeses. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's a no-brainer. We all agree with that, right? Now, this is what I want you to type in the comments. Of those men we would kind of say, sexist stuff, that have those sexist views, what percentage of them have either a mother, a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter, a sister, or a good friend? What percentage of those men you might classify as sexist, what percentage of them also, in addition to having those sexist views, also have a mother, a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter, a sister, a good friend? What percentage do you think that would be? I think that would be 100%. Okay. Do you see where I'm going here? And I wish this was my example. It's brilliant. It's not mine. Robin DiAngelo talks about this in White Fragility. Every single man who came from a woman, last time I checked, who's sexist or has these sexist views, those two things happen they're still the same person. So you can't divorce the two. just because they obviously have adjacency with women. They obviously have affection for women. They married a woman, they have a sister, they have a daughter. They don't hate women. But how is it that they still have sexist views? The same thing holds for racism. The exact same thing holds. Just because we know that you like Black people. We're not saying you don't like people of color. We're not saying you hate people of color. Okay, you can still have your Black friend. We got that. You've got a Black friend. We know it's true. We know it's honest. You married a Black man. You married a Black woman. So we believe that. But that does not inoculate you. That does not immunize you from racist thinking. Okay? Does the analogy make sense? Just let me know if the analogy makes sense, because now I'm going to take it a step further. Why does that happen? And it's implicit bias, okay? For most of us, I said that in the promo for this, I said that racist should really be an adjective, not a noun. And the reason why I say that is, for most people, unless you are a card-carrying white supremacist, you believe in eugenics, you believe that Black people are inferior, you wouldn't let your child play with a Black person, or you wouldn't want your daughter to, date a white person. Yes, those people are out there. Those people are out there. For those people, I'll say racist is a noun, okay? But for everybody else, it should be an adjective, because we're not racist, in my view. We're not racist, most of us. People, we have racist moments, okay? I'm a Black person. I got a Black husband, Black kids. I got Black parents, Black aunts, Black uncles. And I have had racist moments, okay? If you hold on, I'm going to give you a couple examples, okay? Now, how does this happen? Because guess what? I'm drinking the same water you're drinking. I'm breathing the same air you're breathing. Okay? It's like pollution. If we are inundated, if we are surrounded by imagery and actions and messaging and examples and microaggressions, everything is telling us white is good and Black is bad. If I've lived in that society for 50 years, there is no way that is not going to impact my thinking, whether I want it to or not. Let me give you a little bit of an analogy. I grew up in Long Island. Anybody else here from New York, Long Island? I grew up in Long Island. And I literally remember we moved from New York to the South in the 5th grade, in the 6th grade, after 5th grade. And I had a really strong Long Island accent. The kids used to tease me. They say, "Oh, you talking about coffee and talking, and how's your father?" And I mean, I got teased so bad about that. I never, ever, and I used to look at the Southern, I used to make fun of them, and they're talking about fitna and y'all. And I was like, what are y'all saying? It didn't make any sense to me. So even though I've spent my entire adult life in the South, I still kind of had this image of myself as not being as Southern as, people who were born in the South and grew up in the South. Not that there's anything wrong with being from the South. And when I worked at IBM, I was on a client project in New York and Long Island. And so when I got there, I was so happy to be, home. And we were in a big meeting. And I was telling the client, I was like, well, I grew up in Freeport. Like, this is my home. These are my stomping grounds. And my cousin lived in Hempstead. And when I said that, they fell out laughing. And I was like, what are you laughing at? I was like, no. I grew up in Freeport. I'm from Long Island. They said, our nickname for you is Scarlett O'Hara because you sound so Southern. Okay. You could just knock me over in my mind. I didn't want to pick up a Southern accent. I certainly didn't try to pick up a Southern accent. Let me know in the comments if you ever had that happen to you. that you move somewhere and you think you're so different. And then next thing you know, you're talking about y'all and all that kind of stuff. It happens. And that's the same thing with a lot of these racist or biased views. It's not our intention. It's not our heart. It's not what we think consciously, but we're breathing the same air everybody else is breathing. And so it impacts us. So with that, I want to unpack this even more. Two things I want to talk about. If you're still not sold on that, I want to go back in history. Do you remember the doll tests? The doll tests were very influential with the Supreme Court in terms of making that groundbreaking Brown versus Board of Education decision. I know everyone's familiar with that. But this is what we've got to remember about the doll test. And for those who aren't familiar, let me just go back for a second. Kenneth and Mamie Clark they're psychologists, performed the doll test, and they got students together and they had the exact same dolls, but some were brown and some were white. And they asked the students, which one is smarter? Which one is prettier? Which one is nicer? Which one is mean? Those types of questions. And the data was so compelling that it became part of that legal ruling. And the Supreme Court said that was one of the major reasons why they decided that separate was inherently unequal, because the Black kids knew why they were being separated. Now, when the students gave their responses, it wasn't just the white kids who thought the white dolls were better. Who else thought the white dolls were better and smarter and prettier? The Black kids. That's what was really swaying. They proved that it was injurious to the psyche of Black children because they were internalizing this racism. Okay, so do you guys get that? So do you see why it's not persuasive when white people try to say, oh, I've got a Black friend and I've got a Black doctor? Okay, but even Black people have internalized this racist thinking of white is better and Black is lesser. Okay, I want to give you, and I want to talk about one more because this is such an important topic. Implicit bias. So Lisa is saying the doll test makes me so sad, but that's the reality. It's absolutely the reality. I'm going to close today by telling you guys about my own racism, okay? Because I firmly believe that we've got to normalize bias. The problem, one of the biggest problems that we have is everyone doesn't want to be labeled racist and doesn't want to feel like they have any bias, so they don't see their own bias. So guess what? We're not going to fix something if we can't see it. You don't fix a problem you don't first acknowledge. And we're also not going to advance as a society if everybody thinks the problem is outside of themselves. If everyone assumes, well, I'm good, the problem is everybody else. The problem is everybody's thinking that. And so that's why we're not making any progress. Are you guys familiar with the implicit association test, the Harvard implicit association test? Let me know in the comments. If you have not taken the implicit association test, I highly encourage you to take it. It's not just about race. They look at a range. It's more than a dozen factors. They look at weight, they look at gender, they look at age, they look at so many different factors. But in about 10 minutes, you can test your own level of bias. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in my next session, when I talk about those 10 ways that you can increase your racial literacy, one of my recommendations is the book Blind Spot, and that's written by the Harvard scientists who created the Harvard implicit association test. And it's mind-boggling. It's just amazing. You really, anyone who is suspicious about implicit bias, read the book because it's so scientific. It's really, really powerful. But when you take the test in about 10 minutes, because it looks at associations and it looks at how quickly you associate positive things with a white image versus negative things with a Black image and vice versa. And I just want to ask you guys a question. So after you take the test, they're going to categorize you. And I believe there's 7 different categories. They either categorize you as strong, moderate, or slight preference for European or white, neutral, or strong, moderate, slight preference for African American. Okay? So it's either strong, moderate, slight for white preference, or strong, moderate, slight Black preference, or you're kind of exactly in the middle. Okay, so they're kind of 7 different categories. So yes, Kathy, I'm repeating the title. Google implicit association test. You can actually find it at implicit.harvard.edu. So go to implicit.harvard.edu. And if you're slightly interested in this, you want to increase your racial literacy, get Blind Spot on Audible. I listened to it while I was jogging, while I was in carpool, while I was grocery shopping. It's mind-blowing. And it really does explain the science behind it. So thank you for that. So check out that. Somebody put the link there. Very easy to find. If you just put in implicit association test into Google, it will come up. But I want you guys to guess, where do you think I landed? What do you think my assessment was? Where do you think I landed? Strong? First, you could say, where do you think I landed? White preference or Black preference? Okay? So tell me that in the comments. Where do you think I landed? Or neutral. I could be completely in the middle. Strong, moderate. White preference, Black preference, or in the middle. Just tell me that. Where do you think I landed? I know there's a delay here. So, first of all, I took it twice. Wasn't too happy with that first result, so of course I'm going to take it again. For those of you who might have guessed that I landed on European preference, you would be right, okay? So that test showed, first it said I had a moderate preference. There's only one category above moderate, okay? I landed in almost the highest category you can have for white preference, okay? So first I landed moderate, and then I said, okay, I got it now. I'm going to take it again. So I took it again, and I went down from moderate preference for white to slight preference for white. Okay, what does that tell you? I promise you, I don't have any overt bias against Black people. I am a Black person. I have always been a Black person. I have a Black family. They may not all look Black, but they're all Black. I have a Black family. I love Black people. I've been raised around Black brilliance. Both of my parents have PhDs. My college roommate, I went to Spelman, HBCU. My college roommate, who was also my cousin, has a PhD in math. So I've been around Black brilliance my entire life. I was assessed with either moderate or slight preference for white, okay? So that's what we're talking about. It's not that you're a bad person. It's not that you're a card-carrying racist. Nobody is thinking that, you know. One of the things I said in one of my Forbes articles is also when we engage with white people in these conversations and have these conversations, you got to keep in mind, if we thought you were an overt racist, we wouldn't even be talking to you. Most people, I wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't even be having the conversation. So we go into, and again, I'm saying we, you know, I speak for myself, but, you know, having had this conversation with many Black people, I think that my view is fairly representative. We go into it thinking that you overtly believe in equality, that support equality, that have positive views of Black people. So I go into it with that assumption, not a negative assumption. I go in with a positive assumption. But I also know enough about how racism works to know that we're all drinking the same water. We all, if you've grown up in this society, in this culture, you had that indoctrinated. Now, it's funny that I'm thinking about this. Actually, when I was in high school, I dated a guy who was Yugoslavian. He grew up in Yugoslavia, which I guess doesn't exist anymore. And I literally had to sit him down. We were in high school and explain to him racism. I don't think they had many Black people in Yugoslavia at that time. And I might be wrong, so please correct me. But he didn't grow up in that culture. So all of this was foreign to him. He grew up in a very different, and I'm not trying to say that racism is a uniquely American thing. I know that certainly racism is existed in many other cultures, many other countries. So I'm not trying to say that. But just in my personal experience, it was weird to me that I had to explain to him why us dating in high school was a big deal, why people would look at us. He had a completely foreign concept. But for those of us who have grown up in a white supremacist culture, a male supremacist culture, that is just a fact, that we're going, some of that is going to seep into us as well. So before we run out of time, I want to tell you these two stories because I think it's important. People, I try to be very, very pragmatic. I want to give you guys tools you can really use. And I personally think it's important to begin to normalize bias, because guess what? How can I improve as a person? How can I become less biased if I don't see my own bias? So for me, it's problem solving 101. The first step of fixing a problem is being able to recognize it. Just like in, 12 steps. First step in 12 steps is admitting there's a problem. It's acknowledging that deficit or acknowledging that there's a problem that needs to be corrected. So let me just tell you two quick stories. One, I get pitched all the time because I write for Forbes. I'm a senior contributor for Forbes Careers. Please follow me on Forbes if you want to know more about my views on all these topics, but I write on a range of topics. So I get pitched all the time. And let me just clarify, I'm a contributor for Forbes. So anything that I say is my view, and it's not representing Forbes or any other organization. I'm a contributor. But I get pitches from publicists or people who want me to interview them or write about them all the time, like literally like every 5 minutes in my inbox. A lot of times I don't have time to actually read through the pitches, but I try my best. I really do try my best. This one particular pitch came through, and it was a guy who was a marketer, and he was telling me about his company, and I was just skimming through, and he was highlighting his list of clients. And so in the list of clients, there were hip hop stars, names that I recognized. And so when I saw that, I kind of immediately, replied back, and I said, hey, your background looks great. I said, why don't you reach out to some of the diversity and inclusion contributors? I was like, they might be really interested in profiling you. For some reason, that ate away at me. That nagged at me for the rest of the day. At the end of the day, I went back to that email and I read it more carefully. And when I read it more carefully, I clicked on his link to his website, and I looked at his website, and I said to myself, wow, as soon as you saw a few names of rap stars or hip hop moguls, you, in your mind, you put them in a different category. You said, oh, this is for the, DEI section. This isn't for careers. And that was wrong, because he's a marketer. He's a marketing person like anybody else. Just because he happens to have a client base that includes some well-known urban artists or rap stars doesn't put him in the Black category, because that's what everybody else is going to do. I need to look at him as a marketer just like I would anybody else who's a marketer. If a white guy sent me the same thing and sent his client list and it was a bunch of well-known white people, I wouldn't put him in the white category. I would still look at him as a marketing CEO. So I needed to catch myself in the moment because I was having a racist moment. Does that mean I'm a racist? No. any more than, and that's why I'm not a fan of labeling people, but I had a racist moment. Everybody who's on this call today, I'm sure, has done something stupid. Okay. Has everybody done something stupid? Have you had a stupid moment? Okay. Does that mean you're stupid? No. It means you had a stupid moment. So that's the same way I view racism. We have bias moments. We have sexist moments. We have racist moments. We have ableist moments. We might have a homophobic moment. Okay. And we need to, I think, bifurcate those in our mind, because I think it allows us to be more honest with ourselves and to accept that I'm not perfect. I did have a racist moment, because as soon as I acknowledge it, I can start to work on it. And so for me, part of that process is talking about it and not trying to pretend like I'm perfect. Let me tell you really quickly my other moment. And this one was recent. And you guys, please tell me in the comments if you can relate to this at all. I was at the grocery store, and there's a blind woman who is a bagger. And I've been going there for years, and I see her all the time, and she's very chatty. She's always talking to you. And so she was bagging my stuff, and she said something, and I couldn't understand what she said. And instinctively, I turned to the cashier to look at her, I didn't say it, but I was kind of looking at her like, what is she saying? And then I had to catch myself, because I'm like, why am I looking at her, the cashier, to tell me what well, I don't know what to call them, but the person who was bagging my groceries, to tell me what she was saying. Her disability has nothing to do with speech. She does not have a speech disability. She's visually impaired. Now, granted, she's looking down and she's bagging and she has a mask on. And, there are lots of reasons why it was hard for me to kind of understand what she said. But I should have turned to her and said, excuse me, what did you say? But instead of doing that, what did I do? I turned to the person who didn't have the disability, almost like she's her mother. I turned to her to say, I need you to translate for me. And so I had to catch myself in that moment, because that wasn't right. That was biased thinking. That's me categorizing her differently just because she is visually impaired. She's blind. And I shouldn't have done that. And so for me, I don't know, it might seem crazy, but because I'm in this work and because I'm so excited about working on bias, I like finding my bias. I like seeing when I have a racist moment or a sexist moment or an ableist moment. And my kids call me on it sometimes too. Mom, I'll say something and my son will say, Mom, that was sexist. And I love that, because that's the first step of working on it, okay? And we've got to give ourselves grace. It is not saying I'm not a bad person. I didn't walk out of there saying I'm a horrible person, because I know what I think overtly. I know what I think consciously, but that was my subconscious. When she mumbled something and I couldn't understand it, it was my subconscious that made me turn to somebody else and look for interpretation. That was my subconscious at work. And I think that's what we've all got to do. We've got to see it in ourselves. We've got to see it in the workplace. We've got to see it in other people. That is how we move forward. And we've also got to give ourselves that grace to acknowledge we're not bad people. We're good people with good intentions trying to do the right thing. But a lot of trying to do the right thing is first acknowledging we're not perfect and we have some agency and we can be part of the solution. So I am so excited. Thank you so much, you guys. Thanks for being, this person says, thanks for being transparent and vulnerable with us. We all do it, even those doing this work. I'll use that term moment. So yes, do that. Don't label people racist. Say, you know what? Maybe it was a biased moment. Maybe it was a racist moment. Because also, we're all so much better than our worst moment. We absolutely are. And we're so much more than our worst moment. So please join me next time. Again, please put this on your calendar, September 21st and October 5th. These will be our topics, same time, noon Eastern time. And if you haven't checked out my courses, my workplace anti-racism courses on LinkedIn Learning, please check them out. I put a lot of work into them. They're very practical, very specific. how to speak up against racism at work, and then supporting allyship and anti-racism at work. And so with that, I want to thank you guys. You guys are so awesome. And this has been such an amazing community. I've got lots of other questions to talk about. So I have a running list. So please, if you've messaged me or sent me a question by chat, I do have a running list. I'm keeping tabs on those. And I will keep hitting these topics because I think this is absolutely how we move forward. We've got to discuss the undiscussables. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, guys. You guys have a wonderful day.